I've written a letter to Daddy. His address is heaven above.
Greetings from Castle Goring, from Mickey, Aurora, and from me. Oh dear, Aurora sends lots of love for you via my neck. Yes, because Aurora agrees with Tilting Turtle's comment, which is, Meghan is the epitome of I'd rather reign in hell than serve in heaven. Oh dear. I thought I'd just read that out because Aurora agrees with that, and I'm sure many other people do as well. And now, if I may, I will plunge right in with what Linda James says. I am not a fan of Meghan Markle, but she can't take all the flack. And of course, as we all know, yet again, they have managed to insert themselves front and centre into the news at a time when his father has gone through a coronation system in Scotland. William has won at polo, raising £1 million on one game alone. And yet Harry and Meghan yet again manage to insert themselves into the narrative. So, as Linda James is saying, Harry is a grown man, a very privileged grown man, who knows exactly what he has done to his country and his family. He's not an innocent bystander. Stupid he may be, but he is culpable. Lots of English, actually not English, Union Jack flags waving in this wind. And yes, Harry is culpable. Harry is over the age of reason. If Harry does not have the capacity to reason and to know the difference between right and wrong, he should not be unleashed upon society. He should be locked up. If he's not locked up, he needs to be responsible for his actions. The deciding factor is the fact that he is over a certain age. He is responsible legally for his actions unless he has been declared mentally incompetent or criminally insane. Since that doesn't seem to be a likely prospect, yes, he is culpable. However, would any of this be happening with Harry if Meghan were not around? To what extent has he been diverted from the path he was on, maybe with temptations to take a lower path, which he did not succumb to, or there was no opportunity to tread that road, so to speak, until Meghan not only opened up his eyes and the vista, but set him on the road. So I think that's why she comes in for the lion's share of the flack, because by his own admission, she is the one who opened his eyes to things that he had his eyes closed to. Pam McCarthy says, divorce negotiations. Harry is obviously still working with Markle to undermine his family. The fake pap walk with his daughter was just this week. so tired of the smoke and mirrors from them and the royal family. Well, I'm not excusing the royal family, and I do think that there are mistakes that they are making, some of which I have discussed privately previously with senior courtiers, which I'm not getting into at this juncture. Others of which we have spoken about here, and certainly I think Harry and Meghan should be removed from the royal family website. However, the narrative being what it is, the smoke and mirrors are primarily emanating from Harry and Meghan's quarter. That's right. I'm going to make one or two observations that might have eluded some people. In California, there is a specific law banning photography of the children of celebrities. Harry has been photographed with very fuzzy photos with Lilibet, who some people have observed Lilibet doesn't seem to be growing. This is to celebrate Independence Day in the United States, July the 4th. And other people have observed how inappropriate it is for a British prince, a British princess, a British duchess, and a British prince to be celebrating American Independence Day. Celebrating the downfall of his family's association with its 13 colonies. But of course, all of this coincided with the necessity for Harry and Meghan to insert themselves into the narrative and to keep themselves at the forefront. So King Charles III is in Scotland preparing to receive the honours of the Scottish crown and the Scottish people, and except for a tiny group of anti-monarchist, pro-republican supporters, he was given an overwhelmingly positive welcome. William and Catherine were there, as well as Charles and Queen Camilla. Did you seriously think Harry and Meghan, those publicity fiends, were going to miss the opportunity to try to steal their thunder? And irrespective of any turbulence within the Sussex household, as I have said before, they are still functioning publicly as a unit. Sometimes the unit diverges, but the unit is very much, oh, we are successful, we are the Duke and Duchess of the world, or maybe the Emperor and Empress of the free world. We are America's answer to the British royal family. We are global royals. I mean, the mere fact that those children were photographed tells you that Harry and Meghan have colluded with the photographing of that child. Otherwise, the photographers would be in serious trouble, having broken California law. It's unbelievable, isn't it? Really unbelievable. Virgie Clark says, does Meghalaya have dirt on Andrew that she is blackmailing the royal family with? She has certainly gotten away with a lot of crap. 2 exclamation marks. Virgie Clark, there's no dirt for Meghalaya to have on Prince Andrew. Meghalaya, as you call her, has access to endless dirt. The ground is full of dirt. If you do not distinguish between the truth and the lie, between reality and fantasy, and you just dish up the dirt on a regular basis, as and when it suits your narrative, you don't need to be grounded in fact. The ground is full of dirt. The dirt doesn't have to be true dirt. It doesn't have to be based in fact. Fantasy dirt is as good. In fact, it's sometimes better. And people don't seem to understand that this is a huge problem that the royal family has to be dealing with. Anybody who has lived with people like Meghan and Harry will know the danger you face isn't what has happened. The danger you face is the inventions from people of that ilk as to what happened but never did. It's very difficult until you discover irrefutably that somebody is a liar and they are perceived as such, to defend yourself against the machinations of lying manipulators. I'm going to use a little example. George W. Bush knowingly accusing Saddam Hussein of having weapons of mass destruction. And even the UN, I forget what he was called, the examiner who went and he inspected and said there were no weapons of mass destruction. And George W. Bush said, you see, they can't find the weapons are well hidden, we need to invade. Knowing only too well there were no weapons of mass destruction, as it has emerged. So they invade Iraq under a false pretext that was indefensible. Saddam Hussein couldn't defend himself against a lie because you can't disprove a negative. You can only confirm that the negative exists. And this is a huge problem for anybody who comes across people like Meghan and Harry, because you don't know whence the accusations are coming and where they are headed. It's a huge, huge problem. And I'm sure those of you who have lived with people like Harry and Meghan and their accusations will understand the vulnerability that everybody who falls foul of Harry and Meghan's narrative is prone to. Of course, what has happened is that Wolf, remember the tale of the boy who cried wolf? So Harry and Meghan are now so discredited by their own actions and by their own failure to have their accusations stack up into anything meaningful, that even if they came out with a valid accusation, why would anybody believe them? Because they have come out with so many unbelievable accusations which were proven to be unfounded and therefore were not to be believed. And there's no dirt on Prince Andrew, take it from me. I know there's no dirt on him. And I think I know what you're alluding to. And I'm afraid you're barking up the wrong tree. Andrew had no interest in Meghan Markle, past, present, or future. Elizabeth Tetley says, is the reason the children will disappear because they don't exist? Can you solve this mystery, Lady C? As I keep hearing, the Harry and Nutmeg children do not exist. Elizabeth Tetley, they do exist. This is wishful thinking on the part of people who would like to believe that they don't exist. They do exist. I can't tell you how I know they exist, but I can tell you that I know they do exist. I have checked it out at the very highest level. The children exist. There is a child called Archie, and there is a child called Lili. They exist. I know people would like to believe they don't exist, and I know that Meghan and Harry's conduct has led people to believe that there is such a mystery surrounding them that maybe not only is their origin doubtful, but their very existence. Well, I can tell you, unless people at the absolutely highest level are lying to me, they have confirmed to me that those children exist. And that some of the activities that have involved the children are absolutely sound. I don't want to be mysterious, but equally, I don't want to go too much into it at this point, because I'm not going to open up that can of worms at this time and on this forum. And Mickey agrees with me, and so she's snoring. Kim Magyar says, salutations, Lady C. Salutations to you too, Kim Magyar. Hope my comment finds you and your family well. We are, thank you. I'm a bit confused and was hoping you could shed some light on the matter. If it's true that H and Mimi are divorcing, why did he bring Lily out on the 4th, King Charles' Scottish coronation? Thank you for your time. Why does a thief steal? Why does a cow give milk? Why does the scorpion sting? Why do Harry and Meghan insert themselves into every narrative to achieve publicity? Because it is in their nature. they are professional spoilers. They know that things are going to be happening, and they are compulsively competitive. Meghan has released Harry's competitive genie out of his bottle. She has made it okay for Harry to not only trash his brother, but try to run his brother into the ground and his sister-in-law into the ground. Not only actually, but metaphorically. Look how great we are. And those dinky people in Britain. As for the business of if they're divorcing, I caution you to listen to what I have said. I have not said they are divorcing. I've never said they are divorcing. I have said Harry has called in the lawyers. And I have said the other day, in answer to a question about divorce negotiations, tried to shed some light on the actual situation. That does not mean, and in fact I think I took pains to explain that I didn't think they were getting divorced tomorrow or day after tomorrow. Now, they might wrong foot me and get divorced tomorrow or day after tomorrow, which would be the only time in my life that I not only welcomed being wrong, but would actively encourage proof of my error. Sorry, but I would. However, the marriage is rocky. They are fighting not only for their professional survival and their financial survival, but each in his and her own way is fighting for his and her own personal survival. Harry has burnt many a bridge and is marooned in California in a very turbulent relationship where the harbingers are not good for anything long-term positive, but the harbingers are very obvious for ongoing and long-term negativity and destructiveness. Most people in this country who knew Harry don't want to know him again. Well, they certainly don't want to know him at this point. Harry has, according to friends of his, betrayed them. Harry has let them down. They were loyal to Harry over a period of decades. And how has Harry repaid their loyalty? By doing worse than anybody had ever done to him before. Harry had a very loyal circle of friends with the understanding that omerta was the order of the day. And what has Harry done? Sung like a bird. And out of tune as well. And not even sung from a hymn sheet. Sung from a very crass chorus joined by one or two other birds. More than that, I don't want to say. Sam Porter says, I just have to voice my suspicious thoughts. Isn't it interesting that contact with Karl Larsen resulted in a heart attack for Mr. Markle? Not just averting a major problem for Meghan, but twice. And now it appears his reward is a close collaboration with Meghan and Harry. I say close because it seems she chooses the photos that best suit the stories, then she sells them or pays to publicate. Sam Porter, I'm going to read out something else from someone else because it covers similar ground, and I believe in giving credit where it is due, and there is no point in all of you coming up with wonderful comments and wonderful observations, and I spin them around as if they're my idea when they're your ideas. I need to give credit where it's due. Transplanted One says, I remember watching Thomas Markle's channel and took an instant dislike to Mr. Larsen. I saw him as manipulative and opportunistic, and he was clearly angling for the dirt on Meghan, and it was clear Thomas wasn't having it, nor did Thomas want to manipulate the viewers for financial gain, as Mr. Larsen appeared to want to do. It spoke highly of Thomas Markle to me, and I stopped watching it. And Louise Brislane says, what you just told us about Thomas Markle explains why he got sick and the trip never went ahead. He was under too much stress from that nasty reporter, and not being a well man, he was not able to fly above it, but succumbed to the constant pressure placed upon him. What a nasty bit of goods he proved to be. One can only hope that it comes back to bite him at a later date, so that he experiences some of what he did to Thomas. There are too many people like him and Meghan around the place these days, all out to make a quick quid without working, but by using emotional blackmail against others less able to defend themselves. And Lisa Black says, and then I'm going to answer everything in one. Now Meghan is having Karl take photos of her. Something very fishy going on. You can say that again. Here's the breakdown. The Markles are firmly convinced that Meghan never intended Thomas or any of them to come to the wedding. And Meghan, they believe, set him up via Jeff Rayner of Coleman Rayner, an associate and colleague of Meghan's, whom she used before and she has used since. That resulted in not one, but 2 heart attacks. After the first one came a second heart attack, both before the wedding. Fast forward to last year, Karl Larsen gets in touch with Thomas Markle, convinces Thomas Markle that he can help him to restore his dignity by starting a YouTube channel, and starts to make the moves and put on serious pressure on Thomas Markle to do things Thomas Markle doesn't want to do. And I know this as a fact because I was in touch with Thomas Markle and Karl Larsen, made sure he ended up getting in touch with me. I didn't get in touch with him. Thomas Markle Sr. and I used to talk between ourselves, but it was all one-way traffic with Mr. Larsen getting in touch with me and trying at one stage to get me to convince Thomas Markle to talk to him when Thomas Markle refused to talk to him. Karl Larsen was putting serious pressure on Thomas Markle, not only to dish dirt he had no intention of dishing, but also to behave in an undignified way when the whole purpose of the show was to restore Thomas Markle's dignity. And Karl Larsen was trying to hustle the public for money, and Thomas Markle was quite determined he was not going to do it. And Karl Larsen had inserted himself into the whole of the arrangements involving GB News, The Mirror, and me. He was everywhere, like bindweed, like Meghan, everywhere. There was no angle that he didn't somehow manage to get his tentacles around and insert himself into, which put a tremendous amount of pressure on Thomas Markle and actually put a lot of pressure on everybody else, because it's really unpleasant to have to deal with situations like that, especially when it was so high profile and so delicate. And the objective that we were trying to achieve was one that was very nebulous, because it could easily have not been achieved unless it were handled in a proper way. Thomas Markle was put under extraordinary pressure. Now, some of the pressure did not emanate from Karl Larsen, because Thomas Markle is basically a very humble man. And I know this from Gigi Perot. Gigi Perot, to those of you who don't know, was a famous child actress from a very well-established California family. So she wasn't a nothing from nowhere. She started out as something from somewhere, became a huge child star, and taught drama at school Meghan Markle attended. She's a great friend of one of my oldest friends. And when she tells me that Thomas Markle is salt of the earth, decent, generous, doesn't want attention for himself, didn't want credit for what he was doing, and did it over a period of years at that school, Gigi Perot has no reason to lie. That she's not lying. There's no need for her to lie. And Thomas Markle didn't only do it with productions that Meghan was involved with. He did it with productions that Meghan wasn't involved with. And Meghan tried to blackmail him into dropping out of those productions, and he refused to do it. He is a very sensitive man, and he's an older man, and he's not a well man. And I could sense that the pressure was getting to him. And I used to try to reassure him that everything was going to be fine. He didn't need to worry. Everybody was going to treat him properly. And remember, we are dealing with somebody who has been severely damaged emotionally. He has been traumatized, not only by the way he was set up by the gutter press, but that he was set up in his belief by his beloved daughter, who then has refused to speak to him and refused to allow him to see his grandchildren. I mean, if you stop to think of it, the whole thing is iniquitous. And yeah, it's outrageous. And the fact that he succumbed to the pressure was not that much of a surprise to me. What was a surprise was that he got a stroke the second time around. Who is the common link? Where do you see the common thread running throughout all of this? Because let's remember what Karl Larsen posted just the other day about Meghan Markle and Harry. He said that they are his friends. He was busy telling Thomas Markle and me that he was on Thomas Markle's side and wasn't a friend of Meghan's. Now he's confessed all. He's Meghan's friend. And all I can say is maybe Meghan was lucky twice, and maybe Meghan doesn't know her father so well as to have suspected that if she piled the pressure upon him, he wouldn't crack. Maybe Meghan was innocent in all of this. Maybe Meghan had no ulterior motives. Maybe Meghan really was trying to do Daddy a big favor. And this was before she wrote her letter to Daddy. Maybe Meghan was doing Thomas Markle a big favor. Maybe she was assisting in his publicity, not by the protection of the palace, not with the protection of the palace as was offered to her for Thomas Markle as well as her mother. She availed herself of the protection for Doria, but not for Thomas, who was more exposed. And they believe that Meghan is the one who set up the whole sting, because that's what it was, with Jeff Rayner. And going off what has happened in the last few days, Jeff Rayner maybe isn't the only asp that was released from that bag of figs. Maybe Karl Larsen was also released. And yes, it's a very astute observation to make that both those paparazzi who have working relationships with Meghan, and according to Larsen, he's her friend. How convenient that on the two occasions Thomas Markle was driven to death's door by pressure. The first time, it's Meghan's colleague, Jeff Rayner. And the second time, it's Meghan's colleague and friend, by his own admission, Karl Larsen. Well, and of course, maybe, I'm sure, Meghan will say that she is totally innocent, and maybe she is. But maybe pigs fly. Aurora, catch this flying pig for me. Mickey, come on. Pigs. Aurora, You're not going to get any Coke if you don't catch this flying pig. These are reasonable conclusions to come to as a result of the admissions of the people concerned and their conduct. I don't know about you, but I find the whole thing deeply chilling. And I'll tell you better, people wonder why there is a constant obsession with Meghan and Harry. It's because of aspects such as this, where the narrative is concerned, that any daughter could be even thought to have done the things that people suspect of her actions and the statements and claims of other people that she has done. This is this Shakespeare wrote about this. And we are seeing it enacted on a daily world stage. Well, Meghan's an actress, and she certainly managed to get herself an amazing role. She is definitely going down in history as a figure of some significance. Let me put it that way. Volvo Believer says, are you serious to tell me there was no prenuptial agreement? No, there wasn't, evidently. Evidently, when the subject was mooted, Harry, believing in the purity of Meghan's love and in the purity of his own, and because the stars were aligned, because every time Harry said, oh, Meg, you know, I've just been chased by the paparazzi. Do you see them there? Meghan didn't do what Cressida Monas did. Harry, there are no paparazzi. She's, yes, look at them. I mean, did you say you see 3? I see 5. She is a yes woman who yesed him to death and also knowed him into submission. It's called a variable reinforcement. She has fed every single one of his vulnerabilities and weaknesses according to people who know him well. She has released that destructive genie out of the bottle. And let's remember, everybody has a dark side. Everybody has the capacity to be destructive. Some of us more naturally than others. But everybody, under the right conditions, can become destructive. Some people are more resistant to it, but with the right amount of blowing in the wind and the right amount of encouragement and the right amount of persuasion and the right amount of, oh yeah, oh H, I just think you're so wonderful and special and marvelous. And you know that ghastly brother of yours, he's just so jealous of you. And look, that sister-in-law of yours, I mean, she's so jealous of me. And everybody's just jealous of us because we do the job better than anybody else. And they're just jealous of you because you're so much more special than they are. Oh, Meg. I agree. Thanks for letting me know. I've always suspected it. Well, you should, H, because you're far brighter than them. No prenup. Not that it really matters. Because if the royal family, in the event of a divorce, and Harry decides to play hardball. Harry isn't rich. Well, not in terms of serious money. To poor people, Harry might be rich, but to rich people, Harry's poor. Let's put it that way. So, Meg's baby might not end up getting everything she wants. Oh, Lawrence Sanchez, you better keep fit. I mean, you are 14 years older than Meg's baby, but you're voluptuous and buxom. And I suspect you enjoy what Meghan seeks applause for. Meow. Elizabeth Besco says, please tell me why the firm does not take offensive actions towards Sussex. Removal of all titles, no IPP status, no line of succession, no divorce payout from King Charles III to Mega Dragon. Let Megxie and Has-Been fight it out in court. When divorce happens, Megxie has less weapons to use. King Charles III is losing support by taking no action. Sorry, by not taking action. Well, it's not his action to take. Harry is an adult. He's not been sectioned. He's not been deemed to be mentally unfit and not responsible for his actions. So it's nothing to do with Charles, really. Of course, all families, especially eminent families, are very concerned in divorces that things be done as nicely as possible. I know, I speak from experience. I come from a world where people loathed personal publicity, adverse publicity. Oh, they were perfectly happy to be in the gossip columns. But in those days, they weren't gossip columns. They were social columns. Oh, such and such was at such and such's party looking beautiful in pink. That's what people liked. That was the world that my mother functioned in. My mother was quite the socialite in her day. And I'm personalizing this to let you know that my experience is very typical. My parents were horrified at the idea of adverse newspaper publicity as my marriage was unraveling. So was I. My ex-husband and his brother set it up to make money. And the nastier the stories, the more money they made. So if they destroyed my life, it was well worth the price. I don't actually think my ex-husband set out to destroy my life. I think he simply set out to make money. I think his brother set out to do both. But I could be cutting my ex-husband slack he doesn't deserve. The point I'm making is the royal family's attitude is exactly the same as my family's attitude was. Nobody in a high-profile position wishes to have an unsavory divorce. It is traumatic to the nth degree. If you can settle things without filth and without lies. And remember, when Dirty Linen is being aired, half the time it started out being clean. It's the antagonists who dip it in filth. They turn clean things into filth. And you don't know what they're going to come up with next, because you don't know where the lie is coming from. All you know is it's going to be a lie. And it's very difficult to disprove lies initially until there is a pattern established by the liar, which fortunately Meghan and Harry have established their unwillingness to embrace veracity. And Colin Campbell did the same thing ultimately. But it is traumatic to the nth degree. You have no idea how dreadful it is. And it sullies everybody. And nobody who has any decency wants to be a part of it. It is as if you have stepped out of a shower into a sea of feces. Even if you're in the right, you don't want to swim in a sea of feces. You really don't. You don't want it touching you. You don't want it under your nose. You don't want it. It's threatening for you to have to swallow some of it. It's terrible. That's why normally in divorces with high-profile people, if they are from nice families, and I say nice in terms of decent people, they will even give that which they do not have to, just to get rid of the nasty person. My father, it's in my autobiography, my father forced me to give the contents of our New York flat to my ex-husband because he phoned 33 times, if I remember correctly, over a weekend. Of course, every time was a reverse charge call, to tell Daddy the most bizarre things about what he and his brother planned to do to me, etc., etc. And Daddy said, just effectively buy him off. He didn't use those words, but that's what he meant. And I said, no, I don't want to do it. Because I said it's blackmail, and if you succumb to blackmail, the blackmailer only comes back for more. And I was right. But you see, I had an advantage that my father and the royal family did not have. I was brought up in a terrible atmosphere on a daily basis from the age of, well, for several years, let's put it that way. I was exposed to danger and hostility just by the nature of the way I was being brought up. My father never had that. My mother never had that. I can promise you, the only person who's come near to having anything akin to that would be the king, because of the whole business with Diana. And even then, compared to what I went through on a daily basis for 6 or 8 years, it's chicken feed. So they make the mistake that I would never make, because I understood by the time I had survived all of this how to cope with evil. They didn't. I don't think they still do. But there's also dignity to consider. There's also the rights of even people who are wronging you to consider. Just because somebody is wronging you doesn't mean you deprive them of their rights unless you absolutely have to. So there are all sorts of nuances and considerations that come into play that may not be obvious to somebody who leads a more sheltered life. You know, you're getting a divorce, you live in a nice house in a nice area surrounded by a nice picket fence. Your neighbours are going to talk for 3 weeks or 3 months, but you're never going to get in the local papers, much less the national papers, much less the international papers. And it's not going to be an ongoing saga for months or years. So you really have no concept of the considerations that come into play in a situation like this, unless you are exposed to such dangers. And most people who are nice, kind, decent, well-bred, civilized people make the mistakes that my father made. And to an extent, the king, I hope, will have learned from his experience with Diana not to make certain mistakes. But as for the removal of the titles, the king's feeling, and the feeling of all royals by and large, is a birthright should not be removed under any circumstances. So, that's a consideration. IPP status, that has been removed already. The line of succession, watch this space. I hope that answers the question. Liz Black says, Lady C, and this is now a very life-enhancing and positive end to this. So I think we deserve it. Last night I saw the most moving thing on TV. The Paralympian Ellie Simmonds program, Finding My Secret Family. It touched on disability and adoption, two issues you've covered in the past. Do you agree with her that disabilities should be viewed as positives instead of negatives? That's what I came away with from the program. That's a very interesting question. I haven't seen the program. I've sort of read a little bit about it. I've read the reviews, but I haven't seen the program. But they do touch upon her courage, her refusal to succumb to self-pity. And I have made the point before that I've never known anybody with a genuine disability or handicap, however, whatever word you want to use, who succumbed to self-pity. Actually, I lie. I just thought of somebody, a childhood friend of mine who was very beautiful and had polio. And she had two beautiful sisters, and she was eaten up with bitterness that her life would never be as glorious as theirs were, because she'd had polio as a child and was deformed as a result of it. So I take it back. But putting that aside, that's the only person I can think of. Ellie Simmonds is a 5-time gold medalist. And she says that her disability saved her. And I have to tell you, as somebody who was born with a handicap, I have often thought that my handicap has turned out to be a great blessing. It certainly was torment for many years. And it certainly was something that I really wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. But I can now see that it was utilized in such a way by me that I suspect without it, I might have been quite monstrous, really, because I might have been spoiled. Well, maybe not. I mean, who knows? The fact of the matter is, the life you have, if you remove one thing, would be different. I was going to say I might have been very spoiled, but I suspect my mother would have made sure that I was targeted from I was very young, the way one of my sisters was. So, because I was actually thinking that because when I was young, people made much of my looks, that sort of thing. And, it's very nice to think, oh, well, but I was also very aware from I was very young that I shouldn't rely too much on my looks because they'd go. And also that since my mother was a professional beauty and she'd ruined her life and ours, I wasn't going to have false values ruin my life. But the temptation would have been greater had I not had a disability to cope with. And I suspect that Ellie Simmonds is on to something, because people who are born with disabilities learn at a very early age that you have to cope with them, that life isn't perfect, that life can be good despite not being perfect, and that it's up to you. And also there are opportunities that disabilities give you that abilities don't. If you're lucky, as Ellie Simmonds clearly is, she had a wonderful adoptive family. She obviously has a marvelous attitude because her birth mother did not want her, wanted to be rid of her, and she has forgiven her. And I think that's wonderful. I mean, I forgave my father for trying to get me to commit suicide. I understood it. I thought, you have to put yourself in other people's shoes and feel with them and for them. And I understood that to my father, his reputation counted far more than anything else. I mean, he didn't want his good name sullied with having a child like me. And he didn't want a solution to the problem in case it got into the newspapers and it was misrepresented. And for a few years after everything was cleared up, it didn't get into the newspapers and it was not misrepresented. And people were really very nice and kind. For instance, Susie Knickerbocker, I'm sure she exaggerated out of some pity for me to say the nice things she said. I mean, I'm not saying they didn't have some merit, but certainly not to the extent that she said they did. And so, people could be very nice and kind as well. And when there was all the adverse publicity, gratis, my ex-husband and his brother selling lies about me to the newspapers, my father coped with it commendably. And I have to tell you, none of us wanted to cope with it. But my father, he said, well, you haven't killed anybody or stolen anything, so hold your head up high. I thought, right on, Daddy. And I understood, and Ellie Simmonds has understood that her mother, young, single, vulnerable, not equipped to cope with a disabled child, much less a child who is overtly disabled. She had a human response. Daddy had a human response. That doesn't make them evil people. That makes them flawed. That it's forgivable. A lot of things in life are forgivable, but not everything is forgivable. You know, I think evil is not the same thing as human fallibility. And a mother who didn't want a disabled child and didn't understand the opportunities that disabled child would give her for love and for understanding and growth. She's young, it's forgivable. My father's reaction, forgivable. What's less forgivable is when people are vicious and malicious for the sake of it. That's less forgivable. So I think Ellie Simmonds is definitely onto something, but I don't think it's something you should be inflicting on anybody, you know. But usually disabled people have a joyousness and an embrace of life and an understanding of the good as well as the bad. That makes life whole. You know, a lot of problems in life are caused by people not accepting the whole picture, not accepting the facts as they are. You know, they want half a ball, then expect it to roll down the hill. Half balls don't roll down hills effectively. Full balls roll down hills effectively. That means the positive and the negative. And sometimes out of a negative can come a positive. So I hope that answers the question. And what can I say? Thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please keep the questions and comments coming in on any subject whatsoever, okay, that you find interesting. Thank you so much. God bless. And if you have really enjoyed this, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and Godspeed.